No a my poďme ďalej. Ja som rád, že je o technológie a takéto podujatia určite záujem a stále väčší. Ja keď si tak spomínam, 18 rokov dozadu, keď sme s televíziou TA3 rozbiehali prvú a zatiaľ aj jedinú takú technologickú reláciu na Slovensku, Svet technológií, tak ešte tam boli také náznaky nedôvery, ale keď sme pustili prvé vysielania, postupne sa to rozbehlo a naozaj za tých 18 rokov, ako aj ja túto reláciu robím, sa tie technológie dostali tak výrazne medzi ľudí, že ľudia už sami si tie technológie pýtajú a sledujú trendy každým rokom. Máme najväčšie výstavy, ktoré prinášajú, svetové výstavy, ktoré prinášajú tie trendy a ľudia sú hladní po novinkách, ktoré z týchto výstav vylezú, čo sa objaví. No určite technológie pomáhajú nám ľuďom, pomáhajú nám zjednodušiť ten život. Je preto dobré, že mladí ľudia sa technológiám venujú, postupne ich rozvíjajú, zakladajú startupy a mnoho z tých startupov je doslova odsúdených k úspechu, by som tak povedal. No, treba myslieť pri tom startupe na mnoho vecí. Medzi inými aj na financovanie, určite využiť cudzie peniaze, využiť podporu nejakých investorov, ale stále si držať ten svoj nápad a ísť s ním dopredu. No a zároveň je pritom dobré myslieť aj na to, aby sme vedeli tú firmu rozvíť a čo sa stane, ak raketovo narastieme, čo sa už stalo viacerým startupistom, ale aj celebritám a potom vieme, aký bol ten pád. Čiže v nasledujúcich minútach by sme sa povenovali práve tejto téme. Ja som rád, že máme tu rečníka, ktorý sa bude venovať a pomôže možno startupom, pomôže možno vám posunúť tie informácie a vy zase ďalej v tom, ako zvládnuť exponenciálny rast. Ja v tejto chvíli už vítam a pozývam ku mne pána Matthew Griffina, ktorý je popredný svetový futurista a odborník na inovácie z 311 Institute. Three, 311 or 311? It's a Da Vinci Code? Or
311.
311. And what's this?
Named after my son's birthday.
Ah, so great.
So it shows a complete lack of imagination on my part.
That's it. Here we go.
There you go. So how are you all? Feeling good? Yes. Still feels early in the morning for me. I got in about 1 o'clock last night, and I've been in about 5 countries in the past 3 days. So you always know it's quite bad, basically, from a traveling perspective, when you sit in chairs like these and go, that's really comfortable. I like that. My name is Matthew Griffin. I'm a futurist, because that's a convenient title. I'm also a strategic advisor for a whole variety of different organizations. So I look at a couple of things. I look at futures. So futures I typically regard as the next 20 years. I also look at deep futures. And what I mean by that is I go between 20 to 50 years out. So our friend the robot here, I saw him a long time ago. We're going to accelerate beyond him during my presentation. I'm going to show you some things. So when you have a look at all these organizations, these are the organizations I work with, there is so much technological change that I'm going to show you that it's just absurd. Every industry is being disrupted. So giving you some ideas. Airbus are now starting to build flying taxis. Area 2071 in Dubai is building the Dubai of 2071, which is their centenary. And they're doing some crazy things, which I'll come to. BMW, fully autonomous, fully electric, wirelessly charged vehicles. Centrica, along with RWE, they are being, as an energy company, they are being disrupted from the inside out as we see the cost of electricity drop to zero. So Centrica is a £45 billion company that is being disrupted. We've got organizations like Deloitte being disrupted by artificial intelligence. Dentons, the world's largest law firm, 17,000 lawyers, and they're now using artificial intelligence to replace their paralegals all around the world. Discovery, Sky, Netflix, they're all increasingly trying to use artificial intelligence to create the next blockbuster movies. So both scripts, the videos, the content itself, something called procedural content. Huawei, if you use Huawei, Huawei are at the point where they are creating the world's first biological computers. And I've helped them design the next 20 years of these things. With Samsung, I recently did a report on life in 2069, because it's Samsung's 50th birthday, and that kind of gets a bit crazy. With the Lunar X Prize, we're putting lunar rovers on the moon. And then General Motors, same with BMW, fully autonomous vehicles. Lego, does anyone play with Lego? Yes, it's all right, it's all right. With Lego, if you see all these little Lego robots, we now have a way to create the world's first conscious robot. And we've done it using a Lego robot. If you want to know how you do that one, you essentially take a worm's brain and put it into a Lego robot. It's a conscious robot. It's freaky, but people do that. Microsoft, future of artificial intelligence. Qualcomm, we talk about future of computer chips. Future of healthcare. T-Mobile over in the US. 5G, which transforms everything. It doesn't matter what industry or what sector you are in, what country you are in. All of these technologies are coming at you fast. Rolls-Royce, fully autonomous, 250,000-ton cargo ships. And this is all within the space of the past kind of 5 years, 10 years, if you want to stretch it. So there's a huge amount that's going on. But what I'm going to do is, if I went into, I'll give you a couple of scenarios. If I went back to the 1980s, and I said, I have perfect vision, I have perfect knowledge of the future. And I went and had a conversation with all of the educators at the time. And I said, in 2019, I know that we need artificial intelligence designers. I know we need data scientists. I know that we need cybersecurity experts. The educators at the time would have said this. They would have said, what's a cybersecurity expert? And I say, well, it's a person who secures the internet from people who want to do bad things and steal data and information for bad purposes. And they'd gone, sounds a little bit like a sort of futuristic policeman. And I say, yes, that's exactly what it is, futuristic policeman. Then they'd have said, so what's this thing called the internet? And I'd have said, the internet is something that has changed global society and culture and industry from top to bottom. It connects 3.5 billion people. What do you think their response would be? Or what do you think the response would be if I went to BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, Mercedes, and said in 2010, I think that in 7-ish years' time, you will be spending hundreds of billions of dollars building self-driving cars that you no longer sell to customers, that you provide as a service, and you are going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars building electric vehicles. What do you think they would have said just in 2010? I personally think they'd have done this. They'd have shown me the door. And yet today, all of these companies are now pivoting their businesses in dramatic ways that they could never, ever have imagined just 10 years ago. The pace of change is accelerating. Now, what I'm going to show you is just a little sand grain in the desert. So if you go to my website, this is all free. You can download it. This talks about all of the technologies I'm going to talk about and about another 170 exponential technologies. So if I asked you, how many of you think or feel that the pace of change is faster today than it was 10 years ago? Hands up. Yeah. Anyone think it's slower? If I went forward another 10 years and asked the same question, do you think we're going to be moving faster as a culture or a society in 10 years, or do you think we're going to be moving slower? Hands up for faster. There you go. Anyone says slower? No. The reason for that is if I went back to the 1990s and I asked you, what do you think you're going to be able to do with technology next year that you couldn't do this year? You might look at computing and say, we could probably buy a more powerful computer for less money. Or the same money, but yeah. And if I said to you, well, what could you do with that? You say, well, we could ingest more information, analyze more information, and we could do something with that, whatever that happens to be. The problem you have today is if I ask you the same question, what could you do with technology next year that you couldn't do this year? I'll ask you about 5G. What are you doing with 5G? Have you got a point of view? Are you doing anything? Are you using artificial intelligence? And you'll say, well, we're thinking about it, or we are, but we've just started our journey. Are you digitizing your business? Are you moving to the cloud? And you'll tell me that you have just started your programs. Are you using augmented reality? Are you putting your business on the blockchain? Are you looking at quantum computing? Quantum computing is disruptive. It's 100 million times faster than today's computing technologies, and it's already starting to come through now. Robotics, what are you doing with our pal out the front? What are you doing with virtual reality? All of a sudden, your ability to future-proof your business and figure out what you are going to do next year the options are phenomenal. But you've got to understand not just these individual technologies, but how they work within your business, how they work within government, how they can be all combined. At which point, you start getting confused. The future starts looking more complicated. And it all becomes faster. And so it's coming at you faster. Your time to react is less. And it just creates this amazing sort of ball of moss, as we say in the UK. However, and I'm going to start showing you some of these techs, there aren't 8 exponential technologies that are coming into effect and change your entire society or your life or your business. There are over 400. This particular starburst goes from the year 2020 to 2060. There are 12 major categories. On it, there are 25 general-purpose technologies. A general-purpose technology is a technology like artificial intelligence that can transform every industry and that has millions to billions of applications and use cases. It drives innovation. There are 25 artificial intelligence-like technologies coming through today. So I'll take you through some of these ones. Each of these individual technologies can either change one industry or every industry. Every dot is when those technologies start maturing and when you can start using them sensibly, so they are at the right price point, they're accessible, they're all these kinds of things. But each dot represents a technology with an addressable market opportunity of over $500 billion. So I'll take you through a couple of them. So I said that every single one of these can either change one industry or multiple industries. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but bioprinting. If you're taken to hospital, if you have cancer today, if you have third-degree burns, we can 3D print human skin, 3D print human bone, and graft those into you. We've already 3D printed miniature human hearts. We've already 3D printed miniature human brains. So in 20 years' time, as these technologies mature, if you have a heart attack and you go into hospital, we take stem cells from you, we 3D print your own heart. But because we can also 3D print electronics, The healthcare organization of the time could say, would you like a regular human heart? Your own, because it's out of your own stem cells. Would you like your own human heart? Or would you like us to 3D print electronics into it? So that if there's a problem, it can restart itself, monitor itself, whatever it happens to be. We're remembering that today in 2019, we've already 3D printed functional, working, albeit miniature, because the problem is scaling up, human hearts. So that's one. That interrupts the organ donation program. If you have a heart attack in the future, you don't need to wait for someone else to die. 3D holographic printing. It's 1,000 times faster than regular 3D printing. If you are Adidas, you now 3D print your trainers off in the back of your store. You collapse your global supply chain, you eliminate all of your inventory. And then people can use an app to personalize their trainers and do whatever they like, and Adidas can charge more. We've got 4D printing. We are starting to get to the point where we can 4D print satellites in space. So NASA have just started this. 4D printing is 3D printing, but where the 4D is time. So this is where you can effectively 3D print a space station, 3D print a satellite, and it will self-assemble. And I can show you something fun there as well. Bioreactors. I've only done like 5. We've transformed like, I don't know however many industries and lives. Bioreactors. I'll show you this one later. Bioreactors solve famine. Global famine at global scale. You think of the wars, basically, that the United Nations keep telling us we're all going to be in 2050 because of a shortage of food, trying to feed 11 billion people. Bioreactors solve that. We have molecular assemblers, and then we can just go all the way around and round and round and round. We have in vivo gene editing. Last year, we took a patient with Hunter's syndrome, put him on an IV drip. The good news about Hunter's syndrome is that Hunter's syndrome will kill you in 20 years. It's an inherited genetic disease. The bad news with Hunter's syndrome is that it will kill you painfully. So what we did is we took a gene editing tool called CRISPR, put it into an intravenous drip, sat the patient in the bed for half an hour. The gene editing tool found the faulty genes, clipped them out, clipped new ones in. 4 months later, he no longer has Hunter's syndrome. He is no longer going to die. And he's no longer going to die a painful death. But you can now use that same technology to cure 6,000 inherited genetic diseases. We've got mRNA vaccines as well. If you have cystic fibrosis, we can now give you the same gene editing tool in an aerosol or a nebulizer, so you just breathe it in. Where we are with technology, if you think we are here with technology, technology is a rocket ship. It's all the way over there, and it's accelerating. And I won't go through all these, but from connectivity perspective, we have space internet platforms which connect the other 3.5 billion people on the planet. We've got photovoltaics, basically in the energy sector. When we have a look at intelligence, basically we've got artificial narrow intelligence today. In 2035, we'll have artificial general intelligence. That changes the planet. We have creative machines. And creative machines, I'll show you those. We have carbon nanotubes. No one really cares about carbon nanotubes, but they can help you solve paralysis, create terahertz computer chips, and help you create electric vehicles that go 16,000 kilometers on a single charge. And they're also the secret to creating space elevators. So in China, they recently created a carbon nanotube chain that could hold 232 elephants. And it's like that thin. It's crazy strong. In materials, we have self-healing materials. In robotics, we have molecular robotics, DNA robots. We've got soft robots. We have all kinds of things. We've got a way to create polymorphic shape-shifting robots. In in the computing sector, basically, where you think that quantum computers are the most powerful thing that are coming down the line, we've created biological computers. Biological computers where you store information in a bacteria and replay it. Chemical computers, liquid computers, literally liquid computers that have liquid CPUs and chips and liquid storage. Polymers, neuromorphic computers that collapse the world's biggest supercomputers into something the size of a thumbnail. And this is all the surface. This is why I said, so this is in the codex. You go to the website, download it, you can find out about all these different technologies and the weirdness that they're being used to create. And this is today. So what we have is each of these individual technologies is incredibly powerful, as I've demonstrated. But when you combine them together, you need manufacturing, so you need to build your thing. You need to power it and connect it. You need materials, you need intelligence and computing power. You go around there, that's the future of every industry, every product and service, which is why we can start seeing further out now. However, if we get onto some of the technologies, because it is a technology expo after all, I'm going to show you some things that you may not have ever seen before. How many of you believe in magic? See, no magicians in the house. Well, yeah, there you go, that's good. Like that. Are you a magician? That's quite right. Right. So, typically we think of magic as just some form of trick, an illusion. But if I went back 200 years ago, and I took one of these artificial lights back 200 years ago, and I showed people the artificial light, they would say, how did you create that artificial sun? That's amazing. 200 years ago. I could probably do that 100 years ago, and they'd start thinking I'd created an artificial sun. So magic basically is typically just a trick that we think basically we're not sure how it's done, and typically there's technology involved. So how many people like science fiction movies? Yeah. So every single thing that you see in the science fiction movies, we have done. So you'll never look at science fiction movies ever again because they're actually they need to be renamed as science fact movies, which is less exciting. So deflector shields. If you want to create a deflector shield, British Aerospace have done this. You take a laser, you fire it at the upper part of the atmosphere, you create something called a Fermi lens. A Fermi lens is a deflector shield that deflects lasers. Holograms. You know, if you ever sort of watch Blade Runner with these sort of 300-foot holographic adverts, this is the world's first genuine 3D, free-form, free-air hologram. There is no augmented reality involved, there is no glass involved, there is no trickery involved. This is the real deal. Today it's this big, tomorrow it's this big, then it gets this big, then it gets that big. And then the technology to build it starts getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and eventually you go and buy it off the web. There are now 2 of these. This is the way technology and innovation always works. You see one crazy new thing emerge, and then you see 2, and then you see 4, and then you start seeing more and more as people innovate on top of them. That is an actual hologram by every definition that we see in the science fiction movies. And it's done using femto lasers and a couple of other things. Knowledge uploading. If you think that you're only going to still be human in the future, about 4 years ago now, over in America, we put 30 Top Gun pilots from the USAF into a flight simulator. Put them into the flight simulator, took an F-35 fighter jet to 30,000 feet, put it into a flat spin. A flat spin on a fighter jet like that is pretty much fatal. Most of the time, they're very, very difficult to pull out. The Top Gun pilots were asked at the time to land the aircraft. They had to put skull caps on. As they were landing the aircraft, as they were sort of taking the aircraft out of its flat spin and trying to land it, their brainwaves were being monitored and measured and recorded and thumped into an artificial intelligence. They landed the aircraft, took them out, then put 30 volunteers into the same flight simulator, 30 volunteers who'd never been in an aircraft before. Put skull caps on them, replayed the brainwaves back to them, took the F-35s to 30,000 feet, put them in a flat spin again. 60% of the people managed to land the plane. The other 40% of the people who couldn't land the plane didn't have the necessary sort of reactions. At the time, critics said, it's all really nice that you just uploaded knowledge to people's minds, which is lovely, but it only lasted 30 minutes. The human brain is plastic. You can get information out of it, you can put information into it. It's a question of neuroscience. Molecular assemblers. Last year we created small molecular robots, put them into a production line, got them to assemble molecules. Molecular assemblers generation 0.00001 are here. We've done the same with DNA robots. If you want to go and build one of these, have a look at a site called Arvix. It's a research site. You can go and build your own molecular assembler at the local polytechnic. Neural streaming. How many of you would like to stream your children's thoughts to YouTube? So there's a scary thought for you. So this is using artificial intelligence to read your minds. 3 years ago, we didn't have the technology to do this. And these are now being used in healthcare to let people communicate. But what we have is in this particular experiment, we have volunteers who are looking at the picture you see on the left. And then they're wearing a skull cap, so one of these blue skull caps. We are reading brainwaves, pushing those brainwaves into an artificial intelligence, and then it's compiling these pictures. And if you look at these pictures, you can make most of them out. What we are doing here is we are reading information from billions of human synapses in real time to produce images. In 3 years' time, the definition of this will be much, much better. We can do this with movies already, where you can see, if someone's watching an elephant movie, you'll see elephants moving across the screen. Telepathy. This year, we used similar types of technology to let 3 people play Tetris. But they didn't use a regular computer screen. They used they didn't play using a regular touch tablet or whatever it happens to be. They played it telepathically. Again, the interesting thing about this particular technology is it goes to internet scale. If you give people enough equipment and everything else, you can all start communicating at internet scale. Facebook are starting to use this same type of technology, so this is Zuckerberg, to turn Facebook into the world's first telepathic social network. That is actually a thing. He's actually doing that. So if you saw the recent news, the companies they've been buying and all that sort of stuff, they're already on track. This one, tractor beams. Tractor beams are science fiction. And we've got multiple ways to make tractor beams now. The ones basically that pull in light, we can use sound, we can use a whole variety of ways. So what we have here basically is we've just got a blob of material. This is ultrasound. So it's on a bed of ultrasound, and you can see that we can move it around. So we can levitate it, we can move it around, we can do whatever we actually like. However, if you start combining a science fiction-like tractor beam with a 3D printer, you now transform global manufacturing. So Hon Hai basically are now starting to develop these. So what we have is we could 3D print a computer product. So in the future, we say 3D print the computer chip. So the 3D printer prints a variety of different products, components, all that kind of stuff, and then we use the tractor beam to assemble them. And then you have a laser that just welds them. And you now have a functional circuit. So don't think individual technologies, think combinations. When you start combining these things together, you get some really funky stuff. Now, most organizations typically sort of think 5 years out. Some visionary organizations think 20 years out, and then governments, because typically when you're having a look at governments, they're thinking about future of education, future of transport, future of energy, future of infrastructure, future of welfare, whatever it happens to be. If you're a government or a business and you've got a 10-year plan and everything's accelerating, it's not a 10-year plan any longer. It's a 7-year plan. If you have a 5-year plan, it's a 3-year plan. This is why we can't keep up, because the plans that we are putting in place as businesses and governments are already out of date by the time that we draft them. In terms of the rate of acceleration, telephones took 75 years to hit 50 million users. Pokemon Go, to get to 50 million users, because we are all more connected, we're all more digital, took 19 days. However, if you work in banking, asset management, whatever it happens to be, once I've created my product, and if I can get it to go viral, at what point do you see a multi-billion-dollar business built in a day? At this rate, it's going to be soon. Similarly, technology democratizes everything. If you want to get access to the world's most powerful artificial intelligence, go and download TensorFlow from Google. So technology is democratizing everything, it's decentralizing everything, and it's demonetizing everything. Now, if you wanted, I'll give you a little bit of an example. So this was done by students, by the way. We're not talking about professional researchers. If I wanted to do a cancer checkup or a health checkup, I'd have to go to the hospital. In America, I'd have to pay a lot of money. If I use artificial intelligence and the camera on my phone, and I look like I'm taking a selfie, I'm actually checking myself for pancreatic cancer. Because when you get pancreatic cancer, your eyes go slightly yellowy. If I use artificial intelligence and the accelerometer sensors in this phone and do this, I'm checking myself for heart disease. If I talk into the phone, I'm using the microphone and artificial intelligence to check myself for depression, PTSD, dementia. And if I do this with the camera, I'm checking myself for skin cancer. What I've done, basically, is we've taken just a number of students, they've created artificial intelligence models that are over 96% accurate, some of which are now going through food and drug, through US FDA approval. I can now do, so we talk about demonetization. I just gave myself a health checkup for free. Democratization, I just democratized access to primary and secondary health care. Decentralization, I'm doing it here. And then when we talk about cost, it's all lowering. Technology gives you better access to services, but drops the cost of those services in a whole variety of new ways, which disrupts businesses. And then whatever happens in one business inevitably filters around, or one industry inevitably affects all of them. So free energy in the energy sector, for example, affects manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. But all of this rate of change increasingly means that as individuals, basically, we're confused by the rate of change. We're having more trouble understanding basically what all of this stuff means for ourselves, our families, our societies, ethics, morals, whatever it happens to be. And so increasingly, I see people around the world looking for more purpose. Yeah, in this crazy world of the future, basically, what is my purpose? What am I going to do? Now, I said I'd talk about creative machines. We're always told that creative machines could not exist because the thing that makes us all uniquely human is our ability to create. However, we now have creative machines that can create products.
What if you could come up with thousands of options for a single design without drawing, all of which meet specific goals set by the designer? And from those options, pick the one design that delivers on the most important criteria, the design you couldn't possibly have imagined. This is generative design, a technology that harnesses massive computing power, creating forms with precise amounts of material only where needed, achieving maximum performance while wasting nothing. But generative design can be about much more than simply turning out alternatives. Prototypes can be scanned and equipped with sensors that provide real-time performance data that can be looped back into the design process, so the object, in effect, co-designs itself. And depending on the material and method of manufacture chosen, the software can optimize the design for those choices. The things that have limited us in the past, software, materials, manufacturing, no longer do so. With generative design, the world can look and perform any way we want it to. This is the next stage in the evolution of design, and it's happening now.
So if I asked you to go off and design a lightweight drone, for example, you could probably do it. It might take you 2 weeks, might take you 2 months, depending on your skill level and knowledge level. What I can do is, with generative design, I can take a wireframe model of a drone, put it into an artificial intelligence. That AI has to understand the laws of nature, physics, materials, and everything else. So you plug it into those databases. It will now simulate tens of thousands of different drone designs to try to find the optimal one, but it will do it in minutes. That product is already being used by Airbus, NASA, Under Armour, Nike, a whole variety of different organizations around the world. So what we have from a hardware perspective, think about the chairs that you're sitting on. It's already been designing chairs. So anything from basic stuff to advanced stuff. At the moment, we can use these machines to iterate hardware. You take an existing hardware product, it will find new ways to improve it. Eventually, as they get access to more computer power, better artificial intelligence models, new materials in 3D printing, on the one hand, you can do some awesome things. But secondly, you start getting to primary innovation and disruptive innovation. And this will accelerate. These things are accelerating, remember. So as a little bit of an example, if you have children in your schools, basically are teaching children about robotics because they want to be a robotics engineer in 10, 15, 20 years' time, what I'm showing you is something from the University of Oslo. Basically, it is a world first. This is the world's first self-evolving, self-manufacturing robot. The researchers created a robot and they gave it the instruction, get from one side of the room to the other as quickly as possible. The robot has got sensors in it. As it moves across the floor, information from those sensors are pushed back to an artificial intelligence, which is this under the desk. There it is. And that artificial intelligence goes through thousands of simulations a minute to figure out what a better robot looks like. It tests it and everything else. And then once it's come up with robot version number 2, so think of our friend out there. This is the future of the one out there. You can 3D print the robot, assemble all the bits and bobs and put it back on the floor and off it goes. However, 2 years ago, with MIT, we changed the 3D printer for a 4D printer that I mentioned earlier, where 4D is time, and you can create a self-evolving robot that prints itself and then walks off the printer by itself. You start applying these technologies to cars, to other products. General Motors are now starting to use these technologies to design future cars. They've already dropped 50,000 pounds worth of weight from their vehicles. And all of a sudden, the rate at which you can design new products accelerates. So giving you an example, a harsh example. This is a NASA interplanetary lander. One of the companies behind these creative artificial intelligences went to NASA and said, we think we have a new way to help you design your your interplanetary rovers. NASA said, well, the only thing that we're really interested in is reducing the weight of our rovers, because the heavier they are, the more expensive they are to launch and all that sort of stuff. And frankly, in order for us to be interested in you, you'd need to be able to show us a way to drop the weight of our rovers by 20%. Frankly, we don't think you're going to be able to do it because we have hundreds of PhDs at the Jet Propulsion Lab who obsess about this problem. Years, it's their entire lives. So the company went away with a flea in their ear, but 2 weeks later they came back to NASA and said, I think we have something we'd like to show you. And NASA said, well, we did tell you you had to save 20% of the weight, otherwise we're just not interested. Did you do that? And the company went, no, we didn't save 20%. And NASA went, why the heck are you here, frankly? What are you doing? You're clogging up my corridor. The company came back and said, no, we didn't achieve 20%. We achieved 30. At which point, NASA's jaw hit the floor, and this is the primary way now that NASA are designing interplanetary rovers and habitats that are going to be built on the Moon and Mars. If you actually want to see these in the wild, if you like your sportswear, you can go onto Under Armour's website, buy an Architect sneaker for about $300. It was designed by an artificial intelligence and then 3D printed. If you've flown an Airbus A380, they are designing parts for the A380 using these technologies. And if you have a General Motors car like a Chrysler, you're increasingly driving a car that'll drive itself for a start, but you're increasingly driving a car that is increasingly being designed by artificial intelligence. This stuff accelerates the rate of innovation by 1,000 to 10,000-fold. But we can do a lot better than 10,000-fold improvements in innovation.
The frames that you see is not rendered by the graphics engine. It's actually rendered by AI technology that we built.
This is video to virtual reality in real time.
This is the first time we combine machine learning and computer graphics to do image generation using deep networks.
For training data, we're given some driving sequences of different cities, and then we use another segmentation network to extract the high-level semantics from these sequences. We have the UE4 engine to generate these colorized high-level layouts. Different objects were given different colors.
The network converts this representation to images.
It also does other things.
I made my co-author to dance Gangnam Style, which I don't think he would do by himself.
We find some good dancing videos from another person and then use my model to synthesize the dance move. That was created by machines, it's not me.
So what we have is we have a technology that allows us to take video, transfer it straight into an interactive virtual reality world, and create a bunch of weird deepfakes, and change the media and entertainment industry while it does it. Now, earlier, basically, everyone sort of agreed, no one disagreed, that the pace of change is accelerating. So I've just shown you one technology that accelerates the rate of innovation by 1,000 to 10,000-fold. What I just showed you basically is essentially the ability to create immersive virtual worlds in new ways at much lower cost. When we start putting artificial intelligences and robots into those worlds, we can now train them. I don't even really have a number. But frankly, we're looking at hundreds of millions times faster to potentially hundreds of billions times faster. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. If you want to train a self-driving car, they have to do tens of millions of miles before the regulators even look at them. That will take a long time. That will take a good couple of years. Increasingly, car manufacturers are actually putting self-driving cars into simulators, and they'll do 1 million miles in a day. They train the models in virtual reality, and then they do the last bit on the actual roads. If you want to create the world's most dexterous hand, a company called OpenAI, which just took $1 billion worth of investment from Microsoft, took a basic robot hand, some of the ones we sort of have out there. It then created a virtual version of that hand, put that into a virtual reality world. It then put that hand through 800 years of training in 2 days. And that is now the world's most dexterous robot hand, which can replace a whole variety of warehouse workers or whatever it happens to be. Recently, though, another advance, within a 3-day period, the same company used the same technology to put an artificial intelligence through 500 million games of hide and seek. Within the space of 3 days, this artificial intelligence went from stupid to learning how to create and use tools in the same way that humans used to, in the same way that human evolution sort of played out. When you start combining virtual reality worlds and immersive worlds with AI and robots, your pace of change doesn't just accelerate, it goes nuts. In addition to this, some of the other sort of technologies that I see out there is this. If you wanted to create your own videos, today you need a camera crew, you need someone to write your scripts, you probably need a social media manager, whatever it happens to be. These are from Princeton and Stanford University over in the US. There's already a second generation out of this, and it's much better now. All you do is you just type the video that you want the AI to create. And the AI will create synthetic video. And this is what you can see here. So today, these are small, and they're grainy. But version 2 is already bigger, lasts for longer, and is higher definition. So if you want to create videos in the future, you just type what you want it to do. Or you get an artificial intelligence to do the typing for you and create the scripts. We also have artificial intelligence that are now self-coding. We already see the beginning of the automation of programming. So if children are being taught how to program, we have AIs from Microsoft. So Microsoft have DeepCoder, Google have Bayou, where you go and say to them, create me an application that looks like X. They will go to GitHub, Stack Overflow, get the code, compile it, and say, is that the application that you wanted? They only do about 5 to 100 lines of code at the moment. But over the next 3, 4, 5 years, you'll start getting to 1,000, 10,000 lines of code, at which case you are now starting to use AIs to automatically build complex software applications. We also have AIs that are self-designing from Google, self-evolving. There are 5 AIs that have self-evolved recently. One self-evolved to teach itself. That was from OpenAI. When people said to the experts, who are typically paid about $1 to $5 million a year, and they are the world's top experts, they say, fantastic, you got your AI to learn by itself. How did you do that? The experts went, we don't know, did it itself. Facebook's AI recently learned how to negotiate with other AIs and collude. Google's AIs recently learned how to create their own language. They then learned how to encrypt it. Another AI elsewhere was told just to count stuff and suddenly learnt maths. So as we start using artificial intelligence more and more throughout our businesses and our societies, how do you manage self-evolving AIs or AIs that self-design and create child AIs? Google's AIs can now create better children AIs by themselves without the need for people. And then over in Wall Street and Hong Kong, we see the rise of fully autonomous companies. So the world's first fully autonomous company was a hedge fund called IDA that would just keep running. It's investing billions of dollars, and it would just keep running. So autonomous companies, are you prepared as a society for autonomous companies? But I'll sort of go into some of the industries now, and then we're done. So aerospace and space, as you start taking all of these different technologies, as I say, you disrupt everything, but we'll have a bit of fun now. So we have electric aircraft. NASA just took delivery of the world's first fully electric aircraft. However, our access to space has now dropped by 100-fold. So the cost of putting things into space, into low Earth orbit, has dropped by 100-fold, thanks to reusable rockets, better engine systems, and all that kind of stuff. So this starts opening up access to space for a whole variety of different applications. We've now got NASA. So NASA have now announced that the International Space Station will be a space hotel. And in 2022, we have companies actually launching actual space hotels, because as access to space gets cheaper, why not go and spend a couple of nights up there? We have companies like Space Tango, who are now putting into space fully autonomous robotic factories. And Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, actually, ironically, wants to put about 1 million people into space. Elon Musk wants to put 1 million people in space on Mars. But Jeff Bezos actually wants to use these types of technologies to move heavy industry off Earth. That's just a weird one. And we'll probably get there at some point. Now, I mentioned bioreactors on my starburst. One technology. This is how we solve global famine. We take the stem cell from a cow or any animal, fish, so salmon, tuna, duck, chicken, whatever other animals are about. If you take the stem cell from a cow, with a company called Alepha, you can grow in a lab fillet steak. It's not fake fillet steak. It's not plant-based. It's not synthetic. It is the same stuff that would actually grow from a cow. But as we start having a look at the world's fish stocks, you combine these technologies, the ability to grow clean meat, with vertical farms. A vertical farm can produce 8 times the crop yield with 99% less water, 100% less chemicals, and 0 energy, so renewable energy, so closed loop. It's also organic. You can now start taking these technologies, and we do it over in the Middle East. We've already bought a load, same with China. You take these technologies, put them into the middle of the desert. I can give you fillet steak and a lovely kale salad. But I'm going to show you, this is from Finless Foods.
We are making history right now.
Fish without the fish.
At Finless Foods, we're taking the first step into creating a world where everyone has access to fresh, healthy, delicious, and sustainable seafood. We're proud to announce the world's first clean fish ever to be eaten. This means fish produced entirely without cruelty, not just dolphin safe, but fish safe as well.
All right, you ready? Put your fork in. There you go.
Fish is known as one of the most healthy sources of protein on the planet, and we're eating more and more of it every day. Up to 90% of the world's fisheries are overexploited or depleted. Contaminants like mercury, plastic, growth hormones, and antibiotics are increasingly making their way into our favorite foods. We knew there had to be a way to produce seafood without causing the harm that it does now. We're looking at the biochemical process that happens inside of a fish and making it happen outside of a fish in order to produce the same seafood that people love to eat.
What they've done is they've started with nothing, and they've built themselves a whole technological platform to make food in a way that just hasn't been done before. Seeing that come to fruition today was an extremely moving experience, and I think also an important one in terms of how human beings eat.
Why would you choose to farm or fish wild fish with all that environmental and human health cost when you could just have it made by Finless Foods?
At Finless Foods, we're on a mission to revolutionize the way seafood is made.
So what we have is we have a technology that allows us to feed the entire planet. What we don't have yet, basically, is that technology isn't quite cheap enough. So, however, I mentioned earlier, technology brings costs down. If you wanted to buy a pound of clean meat beef produced in this kind of way about 5 years ago, it would cost you $1 million a pound. Today, it'll cost you $363 a pound. The FDA have approved clean meat for sale on Walmart's shelves. You fast forward that technology about 5 to 7 years, if that, really, and you get to the point where you can now grow any form of meat without the animal. You don't need farms any longer. but you can now sell it for under $5 a pound, which beats the supermarkets. Plus, it's kind of organic. There's no hormones involved in this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to keep herds of cows that are contributing 20% to greenhouse gas emissions. And you can feed everybody on the planet because we can stick a bioreactor with a vertical farm here. You cut down transportation miles, you improve sustainability, you improve health and wellness because you can eat salmon day in, day out now. So we think famine is something that we can't solve, we've solved it. But now you've got to get it out and distribute it, and you've got to get it to the right price point. There's still challenges. This year, we're starting to put 12,000 satellites into low Earth orbit. If you are a digital business, we are connecting the other 3.5 billion people on the planet. I've just doubled your total addressable market. Construction, our friend out there, over in Dubai, by 2030, we want 25% of all homes to be 3D printed. In France, you can live in a 3D printed house. And in Dubai, in 2021, we're going to 3D print a skyscraper. So now, construction changes. We 3D print buildings. We get an AI to design them. We use these fellows to build them. We have a community in South America that is building over an entire community in a day. But the cost of building a 4-bedroom house with this technology today is $24,000. As the materials and the technology improve, you'll be able to build a house for $1,000 or a couple. Renewables. If you buy a solar panel today, there's loads. This is, as I say, this is the grain of sand in the desert. Renewables. A solar panel today is about 17% efficient. Perscovite solar panels get to 32% efficiency. Fossil fuels are dead. We have bacteria-based solar panels already that get to 50% efficiency. And if you use the weird technology I highlighted earlier, carbon nanotubes that also helps cure paralysis, we can harvest the heat from solar panels to get solar panels to 80% solar efficiency. You don't need any other form of energy. Plus, if I give you a solar panel today, and you don't need to maintain it because it's perfect, so I don't sell you a maintenance contract, you can disconnect yourself from the grid and your energy is free. If you're an organization like Centrica or RWE, that's fundamentally disruptive to your business. That kills you. Entertainment. So the entertainment industry is changing. I've got a 3-minute video here, and I'd like your opinion on it at the end.
Wish I could see beyond what I can see.
Pay attention.
I wish I could
might not be what you think.
Beyond what I can touch. I wish I could feel beyond what isn't real. I wish I could imagine, yeah. There's more to who we more to what we could be. As I feel the weight of being, I'm learning how to break free. I'm breaking, I'm breaking. in someone else's mind, but underneath a smile, we all feel quarantined. There's more to who we are. There's more to what we could be. As I feel the weight of being, I'm learning how to break free. I'm breaking free. I'm breaking down, breaking free.
So you're wondering why I showed you a 3-minute pop song of a human artist, right? The reason why I showed you that is because it wasn't a human artist. That song, the video, and everything else was compiled and created by an artificial intelligence. We now have artificial intelligent musicians, virtual pop stars, virtual bloggers, virtual influencers, and everything else who are now being signed by Sony Entertainment and Warner Brothers. Actually, Warner Brothers Entertainment. So, from an entertainment perspective, we are increasingly able to create convincing, good, synthetic content. That changes everything about the entertainment industry. And then we've also got robot surgeons in healthcare. So this one, I'll skip through this. This guy's doing a robotic surgery. The only difference is the patient that he's operating on is 30 miles away over a 5G network. So by combining human skills, robotic surgeons, bear in mind we've actually got some autonomous robot surgeons in China now as well, particularly in dentistry, which is freaky, and 5G, you can now do surgeries anywhere on the planet.
做到在很多场合，比如说救灾的场合，还有一些像边防上，还有一些呢，就是说像我们将来的基层和大型医院的连接，我们完全可以做到，就是让外科医生做到一个标准化的术式，一个人可以去做几千公里，或者是那个几百公里，各种各样的这样点对点的一些连接。
In the retail space, we are using 3D printing, as I mentioned earlier, to disrupt the fashion industry. If you have a retail store, your problem is probably too much excess inventory, which sucks up your money. These are out of Miami. However, Adidas, Nike, they're all starting to 3D print apparel in the backs of their stores. This is all 3D printed, but the reason why we can 3D print these garments is because, one, we have a 3D printer, but secondly, we have created new materials that let us create these creations. These garments are now appearing in the Oscars and everywhere else. You now have retailers who don't need to hire manufacturers, who don't need to ship product, who don't need to hold product. You combine this with creative machines and autonomous vehicles like Amazon are, you have the world's first fully autonomous retailer. In 2020, Amazon have everything they need to design clothes, manufacture clothes, basically in the back, and then ship them autonomously. Retail is getting disrupted again. And then transportation, this is the final one. We have electric vehicles today with lithium-ion batteries. We have Toyota, Hyundai, and Lightyear One, who now have cars coming through that have no batteries. They just have solar panels and solar materials on the roofs. This one basically is a 2030 Lamborghini, a Terzo Millennio. And what we're doing here is we're turning the carbon fiber, the structure of the car, into the battery. They're called structural batteries. So when we start thinking about the pace of evolution of electric vehicles, that's accelerating as well. However, in 2024, we have some something fundamentally different coming. This has been flight tested 70 times already. So how would you like to live in one country and work in another and commute backwards and forwards every day? This is probably faster than your morning commute today. And all of this is autonomous. This is SpaceX. So as I've showed, there's not one thing changing, there's hundreds, thousands of things changing, and it's affecting everything about our society. So my question to you is, are you prepared? Are you ready to unlock your own potential? Use human innovation and ingenuity, basically, to combine all of these different things together to solve global problems. And that concludes my speech. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Ďakujeme pekne. Matthew, it's one more question.
Yes, that's a really good question. So I actually work increasingly with regulators because, as I've demonstrated, technology is a rocket ship. You're never going to future-proof yourselves, your business and everything else because it's accelerating all the way over there, but you can sort of get a good point of view. If technology is a rocket ship, typically governments and regulators are on a bike with a puncture. And from an ethics perspective, as we start teaching children about a lot of these sort of futuristic things, ethics is one of the core things, because all of these technologies I showed you, you can use them to do amazing good for society. Help people live longer, better, healthier, sort of more productive lives, whatever it happens to be, have more fun. However, you can also use them for evil. If you have a look at artificial intelligence can help find the latest vaccines, which it already has in Australia, or alternatively, you can use it to go and hack nuclear missile systems, basically out of the Pentagon. And there's actually an AI called Mayhem that is doing that, which is weird. So evolutionary ethics, so when we talk about exponential innovation, that's all the way over there. When we talk about ethics, ethical discussions, ethical standards, ethical frameworks, ethical guidelines, that's all the way over there. That's still sat on the shelf. And I think that's a problem. In fact, it's a major problem. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.